Hi, today we're going to talk about a very interesting poem written by Patience Agbabi, and it's called Eat Me. And we're looking specifically today about the presentation of women. And this is not an uncommon essay question for exams. So we're going to divide our analysis up according to how the poet addresses the subject of the female. The first thing I want to refer to is the way that this particular female is spoken of as somebody who follows instructions, and how the poetry is shaped to illustrate this. So for example, the second stanza, we have the icing was white but the letters were pink. They said eat me and I ate, did what I was told, didn't even taste it. So here is an illustration of her blindly following instruction. She ate and she didn't taste. The whole purpose of eating a birthday cake is to enjoy the taste, enjoy the experience, but it slips down in rather a meaningless way. Her willingness and her ease with which she follows these instructions is illustrated by the enjambement in this stanza. Line 2 runs over and I ate, did what I was told. And there is a sense that there is an automatic running of following instructions that she obeys here, and the form of the poetry there highlights that. Similarly, in the next stanza, we get more enjambement. Then he asked me to get up and walk round the bed so he could watch my broad belly wobble. There again, there is a sense that she doesn't even pause or consider not following the instructions. So woman here is presented as someone who automatically does what she is told. She is very disempowered, certainly at the start of this poem. Another aspect of presentation of women is how she is owned here in this poem by the man. And this is very obvious through the use of the possessive his. So we have I was his jacuzzi, his breadfruit, his desert island. The idea that she is owned and manipulated by this man, the dominant his is splattered throughout this poem and shows how through her life she is viewed as a possession here in a very sinister and unpleasant way. She is defined by being compared to objects, therefore objectified, objects that he owns and he enjoys. The next way that she is presented as a woman out in the wider world, someone who is observed by people for her weight and size, and I think this is done very cleverly in this poem. We have this stanza, too fat to leave, too fat to buy a pint of full fat milk, too fat to use fat as an emotional shield, too fat to be called chubby, cuddly, big built. And this stanza is one that shows what society thinks of particularly women who are larger than a normal size. The reference to buying a pint of milk, an everyday occurrence, she feels that people are watching her and judging her because she's buying full fat milk. And this is a reference to the judgmental attitude that women often feel about their bodies and about the way society looks at them. This repetition of too fat to, echoes the repetition that of the voices that she hears everywhere she goes. Someone is thinking or saying she's too fat to. And it also shows this is her internal monologue that she even suspects for herself. There's a sense of guilt, or I'm too fat to do this, too fat. This brings us to the notion that this is a dramatic monologue in its form. It's written in the first person, and there is a tone here of the woman seeking sympathy, seeking a listener, seeking a friend, and also perhaps a confessional tone, seeking either a congratulation for her actions at the end of the poem and for surviving, or perhaps a judgment for her actions. Ultimately, in this poem, she, it is implied, resorts to cannibalism. She eats her partner because there is nothing left to eat. And there is a dark side to this, as well as a darkly comic side to this. So with this in mind, her eating her partner, I think another way, the imagery running through this poem, another way that woman is presented is a receptacle for the attentions and the physical side of a relationship. She turns into a receptacle for the man. At one point she says she was his jacuzzi, something that he could submerge himself into. When the man is quoted, he refers to burrowing inside girls. That is what he wishes to do. And this is quite explicitly referring to his sexual desires. We also have the image of him pouring olive oil into her mouth. And again, she is a submissive, empty receptacle that depends on the man for fulfilment. However, towards the end, she becomes the ultimate receptacle, and she turns the imagery and the notion of being a receptacle for the male into something rather assertive, and for her perhaps positive. She becomes the ultimate receptacle. She eats him, and she digests his body. If that is the reading of the poem that we are to pursue, that she does do this, which I think is fairly clear from the line, "There was nothing else left in the house to eat." Another way that, and we've touched on this slightly, but another way that her size is presented in this poem is through the way the poem sounds. We have a lot of alliteration focusing on her belly and the actual physicality of her flesh. She walks around the bed. Her broad belly wobbles. Her hips judder like a juggernaut. The bigger the better, he'd say. All of this alliteration mimics the kind of wobbliness of her belly, and that simile, judders like a juggernaut, a very heavy lorry, a very heavy caravan of people. In the past, a juggernaut has been used to describe. She juggers like that. So you can hear through the alliteration, the sound of this poem, the physicality of the difficulty of moving and the waddling, wobbly motion of moving. So in some ways, as you can see, the presentation of woman in this poem is rather negative. It shows a woman who has been oppressed by society, feels oppressed by her body, oppressed by her age. She starts off at 30. After 10 stanzas, she's approaching 40. He whispers this to her. Her body image is a central way that this woman is presented. However, I do feel there is a positive side to this in the way she tackles this, in the way she stands up and creates the monologue, creates the humour, and ultimately triumphs over this man. So I hope today you've begun to understand what is a very interesting poem, and that you have begun to see a way in to how you might shape an essay on the presentation of women and the sorts of things that you would want to discuss. So hopefully today we've looked at how to solve a problem like eat me.